Cruising is back on the agenda. After sitting idle during the pandemic, the luxury liners are finally setting sail for dream destinations again. Some 10 million Europeans book a cruise every year. Once on board, passengers hope for sunshine, blue skies, and a light breeze. But once in a while, a holiday aboard one of these dream boats can quickly turn into a nightmare. In 2012, the Costa Concordia capsized off the Italian coast. 32 passengers lost their lives. Accidents at sea are far from uncommon. Just how safe are luxury cruise ships?
Evacuations at sea, potentially in adverse weather conditions, are difficult operations, fraught with danger. When the weather's bad, it's almost certainly better to stay aboard a large vessel than to get in a lifeboat.
Passengers are drawn to a luxurious onboard experience. Today's huge cruise ships resemble floating amusement parks, boasting countless attractions, bars, and nightclubs. But is it all one giant party at sea, or are there risks involved? Cruises are one of Europe's most popular types of holiday. Travelers are keen to make up for 2 years of restrictions during the pandemic. Over the next few years, 70 new cruise ships will be constructed, all with even more exciting attractions on board. But the industry has its critics, especially those living close to where the cruise ships dock. Residents complain of air pollution, like here in Marseille. The French city is home to one of the largest cruise ship ports in the Mediterranean. Michel and Claude Rosier have lived here for decades.
There was a beach at the end of this street, a marina with boats. And above all, there was a sense of freedom. It was a great place to live. All kinds of people used to flock here, whether rich or poor. And in the evenings, we would dine down by the water.
But as the number of cruise ships arriving continued to grow, so did the air pollution. A nightmare for the Rosiers.
I've lived here for over 40 years. On one hand, it's fantastic because you have this beautiful view of the sea. But it's also been 40 years of campaigning against environmental and noise pollution.
Chemist Axel Friedrich is visiting the Rosiers. For many years, he was head of department of Germany's Federal Environment Agency and is an expert in the field of air pollution. The couple are hoping for his support. Friedrich now works with environmental organizations such as Germany's Nature and Biodiversity organization, NABU, and measures toxic fumes around the whole Mediterranean area.
I'm worried about gardening, because you're not supposed to do strenuous activity when pollution levels are high. It can damage the airways or lead to cardiovascular disease, which I already suffer from. I'm convinced it's caused by the air pollution here, but there's no research, so we can't prove it.
Axel Friedrich wants to determine potential pollution levels at the house. The device he uses measures nitrogen oxide, a harmful gas known as NOx for short. It can cause respiratory and cardiovascular disease. The first results are encouraging.
The results now are below the WHO's recommended levels.
But then a cruise ship in the port starts its engines. As soon as the vessels set sail, levels of NOx increase.
Now we have 130 micrograms per cubic meter. The WHO recommendation is 10. It's problematic in the Mediterranean region where ports lie at the base of mountains. The wind blows pollution straight into the towns and cities.
What's the reading now?
50, 60?
It's still increasing sharply. Particle readings are going up too, even though the ship is a long way out now.
Yes, you can smell it too.
The chimneys not only belch out nitrogen oxide, but also particulate matter. It's measured in micrograms per cubic meter.
The particulate matter readings were over 40,000, which is extremely high. Normally, we would expect readings between 2,000 and 3,000 particles per cubic centimetre. When the ship set sail, we also saw nitric oxide levels explode from 3 or 4 to 140 micrograms per cubic metre. This one is low, but this one is really high.
Although finer than a human hair, these particles pose serious health risks.
We're fighting because we don't want to end up dead. When you see readings like this, you have to ask yourself, how long can this continue? And our property sits at the same height as the chimneys, so we get more fumes here than most people.
And the response from local government?
Our previous mayor said it was unlikely to become a problem, as the mistral winds we have here would blow any pollution away.
They need to stop telling us the cruise industry is good for our economy. If the health of the population here continues to worsen, it's going to cost a lot more.
The Rosier's neighbours are also feeling the effect of air pollution.
6 or 7 of our neighbours have had cancer, despite there being no history of disease in their families. I have nodules in my lungs too, although I've never smoked. It must have something to do with pollution levels. Even though it's improved slightly, we've been breathing dirty air for decades.
More readings by Friedrich confirm cruise ship pollution also impacts residential areas nearby. But is Marseille an isolated case? Rostock-Warnemünde on Germany's Baltic coast. The university here is researching the environmental impact of shipping. Similar levels of hazardous pollution can be found in a number of other ports. What effect can fine particulate matter have on our health?
Many of these particles are classified as carcinogenic, and that's one of the biggest problems.
Fine particle pollution can lead to a range of health concerns.
We know this for a fact. Air pollution can lead to lung disease and is especially dangerous for those with underlying illnesses, such as asthma, COPD, or cardiovascular disease. Older people and those with pre-existing conditions are hit hardest. We have evidence that air pollution can cause heart attacks and strokes.
Vor allem Herzinfarkte und Schlaganfälle sind nachweislich auf Luftverschmutzung zurückzuführen.
Just like the rest of the Med, Venice has been unable to escape cruise traffic. Gargantuan liners ploughed their way to the heart of the old city, where their undertow soon threatened to destroy Venice's historic palaces. Some cruise ships are now only permitted to dock outside the city. The cruise ship craze has brought air pollution to every port in Europe, but across the continent, people are beginning to fight back. The Geringer Fjord in Norway. Cruise ship travel has caused unprecedented levels of pollution here, with toxic fumes becoming trapped in the narrow fjord. The Norwegian government decided to act and cut the number of ships entering the fjord. High-emission vessels are now banned, and more restrictions are expected. Air pollution caused by cruise ships is measured at a research institute at the Songdalsfjord.
It's the most polluted port, has been the port which has had the largest amount of tourists. So it has been Bergen, Oslo and Stavanger. But we also have some more local destinations like Flåm and Geiranger, which also have had ships that have been sailing in and also had relative high pollution.
Norway's politicians are pressing for legislation to allow only emission-free ships to enter the fjords. It would help tackle climate change too.
It has a huge impact, as I stated, per kilometer and a per person base. Cruise tourism is one of the most polluting travel forms. So, and we see that it's about 700 kilograms of CO2, which is emitted connected to traveling in an average cruise in Norwegian waters.
Norway was quick to recognize the problem and respond. From 2026, all cruise ships and ferries entering the country's World Heritage fjords must be emission-free. Major shipping companies like AIDA and MSC are investing in a new technology, liquefied natural gas, or LNG for short. The advantages? No fine particle pollution and lower CO2 emissions. So, is cruising set to become a greener form of travel? Is a gas that can power the huge AIDA Prima the answer to all our environmental problems? Rotterdam. Ships here are moored next to residential housing.
So LNG ships are no better than fuel oil ships. Because the main problem of LNG is that it does not only emit CO2 like fuel oil ships, but it also emits methane. And methane is a very potent greenhouse gas. So any quantity of methane that escapes in the atmosphere is warming the planet faster.
As a greenhouse gas, methane is around 25 times as potent as carbon dioxide.
This means that on average, we estimate that up to 3% of the gas that is burnt by ships is not combusted. And this methane directly goes into the atmosphere.
Methane is the largest component of natural gas. When it burns, it releases CO2 into the atmosphere. But when uncombusted methane is released, it acts as a much stronger greenhouse gas than CO2. And now, for the first time, we can see it.
We were able, with an infrared camera with a special filter, to detect hydrocarbons. And this camera was specific in order to see methane clouds. And this is the proof of uncombusted methane emissions.
Some cruise ship operators are also skeptical when it comes to LNG's green credentials.
Our perspective is that LNG is only a short-term solution that takes down part of emissions. It's not a long-term solution. We do need to find completely different technologies and fuels to use if we're going to get to carbon neutrality and zero emissions. The growth in LNG has been predominantly driven by that it was cost-effective. It was a cheaper way of operating a ship because the cost of LNG was lower.
Cheap gas is now a thing of the past. AIDA was the first to invest in green cruising and liquefied natural gas. But do shipping companies believe LNG contributes to climate change? MSC has announced it will continue to use LNG, but plans to reduce methane emissions for the new vessels. Shoreside power is one effective way to reduce air pollution in ports. In 2016, Hamburg launched its first shoreside power station for cruise ships. Ships no longer need to rely on their engines when at berth, which helps clean up the air in port areas. But the take-up in Hamburg is still low. In the Norwegian city of Bergen, shoreside power is available in all its quays, but not every cruise liner uses it. Across Europe, only 20 other ports currently offer shoreside power, and most ships still need to be converted. The EU plans to make the use of shoreside electricity mandatory by 2030, but with a host of exceptions until 2035 and beyond. France's government would like to see legislation introduced earlier, but ports often balk at the high investment. Marseille is one example. Shoreside power is a political objective, but it's yet to be implemented.
Financing by local authorities is relatively simple, but collating paperwork for EU grants or state subsidies is much more time-intensive. Once the quays install shoreside power, the shipping companies need to retrofit their vessels. There's no point providing PowerPoints if ships can't use them.
The problems residents are experiencing with environmental pollution can be solved, but it's a deadlock.
This is a political problem, really. The port authorities won't act and carry out policy like in Northern Europe. It's heartbreaking, and it will have serious consequences. A lot of public money will be spent on caring for all the people who are sick, because it's making us sick. It really is.
In Cannes, cruise ships are now banned from docking directly in the port. They must anchor further away from the coast, and the city's mayor has gone even further.
I saw nothing that was changing. So in 2019, we set out our own demands to the shipping companies. If they continued to use fuel with a sulfur content over 0.1%, or release any sewage or waste into the water, either on approach or after anchoring, we would ban their cruise passengers from coming ashore.
Similar to Northern Europe, a group of countries in the Med have also imposed stricter sulfur limits. But will it help? Back in Rostock, Ralf Zimmermann is researching the harmful effects of marine fuels such as diesel and crude oil. In 2020, the UN's shipping agency IMO set limits on the sulfur content in shipping fuels. It sounded like a positive step. Vessels are often powered by cost-effective crude oil, a sticky black goo that liquefies when heated. It contains all kinds of pollutants. But how dangerous is its sulfur content?
20 or 30 years ago, sulfur was a hot topic as we were grappling with the effects of acid rain and high sulfur emissions. People were worried, but sulfur doesn't really pose a health threat.
If so-called scrubbers are used to filter out sulfur, these marine fuels can still be used. But do scrubbers simply remove harmless sulfur, or can they filter other pollutants too? Scientists are now taking a closer look.
The aim of a scrubber is to remove sulfur or sulfur dioxide, and they do that really well. However, there's barely any reduction in other pollutants, certainly not to a limit you could inhale safely.
So basically, the remaining air is no safer than before?
No. We are seeing the same concentration in inhalable particles as without using the scrubber at all.
So, scrubbers are good for the environment, but fail to reduce pollutants that pose a health risk.
We analyzed the substances that are released when crude oil is burned, and the overall mass is certainly reduced. That's the claim made by scrubber manufacturers, shipping operators, and owners. But that's irrelevant, as these large particles that have been removed can't be inhaled anyway. The capture of very fine particles, smaller than 2.5 micrometers, is almost non-existent.
Partikel kleiner als 2,5 Mikrometer findet so gut wie keine Abscheidung statt.
The 2E brand claims to have reduced particles by 60% after investing in scrubbers and catalysts. No information about the percentage of hazardous fine particles is available. Norway is taking a very different approach with its very first E-cruise ship. While the vessel's scope is still limited, it's enough for a few hours at sea. Shipping company Hurtigruten stopped using crude oil years ago.
We also see a lot of greenwashing out there today. There is a lot of focus on telling the story about marketing themselves as green, whereas not doing enough. So for us, it's all about action and making or showing that it's possible to do significant reductions.
We are constantly challenging ourselves when it comes to technology, and we are also trying to challenge the industry. I think independent of size, the future would hold no room for operators which are not taking sustainability and responsibility seriously.
Popular German TV series The Dreamboat sparked a global enthusiasm for cruises. It was shot also on the MS Deutschland during a regular trip. For years, Andreas Jungblood was captain of the real-life ship, but now warns of new risks out at sea. He's especially critical of relying on lifeboat rescues, pointing out that most members of onboard personnel have little to no nautical expertise.
Service personnel aren't used to being at sea, so of course they're frightened when big waves start crashing into the ship, or the lights suddenly go out. They think the end is nigh. Suddenly, all the processes that were in place are abandoned, and they have to improvise. And it's hard to get the ship into a safe position to let down the lifeboats.
He's also concerned about the ever-burgeoning capacity of cruise ships. The more passengers on board, the more complicated an evacuation at sea becomes.
I used to carry between 300 and 400 passengers, and I always thought we could probably manage it. Not very easily, but we could manage. But evacuating 4,000 people is going to prove tough. You can practice all you want. It's going to be tough.
In 2015, a fire broke out aboard French cruise liner La Boreale that left the ship drifting off the Falkland Islands in stormy conditions. Hundreds of passengers were evacuated. Four years later, Viking Sky suffered an engine failure off the coast of Norway. A loss of oil pressure is later cited as the cause. The ship is left drifting towards cliffs. The captain sends a mayday call. Alvin Finn and the crew of his rescue helicopter are sent to the scene.
They actually told us that it's a ship drifting. It's very close to the shore. It's about 1,500 persons on board. And we knew the weather. It was a full storm, close to a hurricane on the coast. And we thought, oh, wow, this can't be possible. They're going to have their engines up running before we get there. So, but this time they didn't. And it's the biggest ship, or with the most people in such a condition I've ever been on.
The ship continues to drift, battered by 30-foot waves. The Hustadvika coastline is well known for its perilous underwater reefs. Viking Sky is in imminent danger of foundering into its rocks. News of the incident soon reaches Vivax, a tugboat moored in Stavanger. Viking Sky is 3 hours away. Can the crew help?
So we run up on the bridge and turn on channel 16, and just as we came up on the bridge, the phone called from Norwegian government if we could go and assist. So we started up and just went straight out. And on the way out, we started to prepare towing lines and towing gear.
The captain of Viking Sky drops the ship's huge anchors, but to no avail. One even breaks.
One moment you could see under the bulb, and the next thing you could see on the roof of the cruise ship. So the movement was so big between us and him in the reefs or the shallow areas there. It builds up a lot of seas. So the problem was to get a line over to them because of all these movements between us and him, and also going like this, and yeah.
It was hours before the boat could be towed. A number of helicopters are sent by the Norwegian Army and private companies in an attempt to rescue stranded passengers.
Normally it's very easy to handle. We go out to the ship, we just go on top and hoist down. It's a very easy because they are so big, they don't move that much. It's a good space on them to hoist up and down. So we were making a plan based on that. But as we could see the ship and how much that big ship was moving, we understood immediately that we couldn't follow our initial plan. We had to rethink and do this in another way because it was moving a lot. The waves were 12 to 15 meters. And normally ships are moving, they have like this period with a lot of movements and then they kind of calm down for 10 to 20 seconds and start moving again. But on this one, in this scenario, it didn't do that. So we just had to take the decision if we are able to get the rescue man down in a safe manner. Because there are sometimes so difficult that it's not safe. And that's the most difficult decision for us to take, because we cannot do this if it's not safe for us. We can't risk our lives to, then no one gets there.
Fortunately, Viking Sky's crew is well trained and able to assist the rescue teams.
We have these rescue slings. It's a sling that I take around the person, under his arms and the back. I fasten it, and they kind of hang like this, and we can lift them up in this. Someone is happy to leave the ship and sees the helicopter as their safe zone. Someone, or most people, thinks the hoisting itself to kind of hang in this sling over the water, because the helicopter is on the outside of the ship. So you're getting hoisted up and out over the water. Most people think that is very scary, but it's very safe.
Every 2 minutes, a passenger is airlifted. On shore, local Mayor Tove Henon is being briefed. A crisis unit is being assembled and rescue teams summoned. The urgency is tangible. Everyone understands how perilous the coastline can be.
Even before the police rang me, neighbors here called me and sent me pictures and said, this is wrong, the ship is coming too close to the beach. And Norway has a long shipping tradition and maritime tradition, and people here have been living by the sea for generations, so they immediately understand that this ship was coming too close to the shore and had problems. They say about 50 meters, so it was very close. And I get goosebumps only to think about it and see it again, because it would really have been a disaster. If the weather has been better, you would have all the locals coming out with the boats to help. But at this state, it was impossible. No boats could come out in the ocean.
Out at sea, the crew is desperately trying to restart the ship's engines. Back at home, Hustadvig's chief fire officer begins to mobilize his crew.
I was thinking about the people on board. We got the message that it was around 1,300 people on board, and we asked again to repeat that number, because we didn't expect that many people. But yeah, we felt at first probably a little bit helpless.
90 minutes after the mayday was issued, a helipad with its own fuel point is created near the coastline.
It was a lot of helicopters. I think it was landing helicopter 15 minutes, and a new one and a new one.
Everything is prepared for those rescued from Viking Sky.
They were physically okay, but emotionally they were happy, but we can see that they have been through a lot the past hours.
Not a single lifeboat had been deployed.
Imagine you're out there and force 8 winds. You won't be able to get the lifeboat down in one piece. There's no point even trying. It will probably shatter against the ship's hull. Evacuation is a last resort, but there has to be an alternative to letting down lifeboats in force 8 or 9 winds. It's impossible.
It's always an option to use the lifeboats, but in this area, in those waves, I don't think those boats would have been able to go against the waves. Probably they would have been drifting on all these reefs and to the shoreline as well. I don't know. But I'm not sure if all those lifeboats would have survived.
Viking Sky comes within 100 meters of the rocky coastline. The rescue operation is carried out meticulously.
It was really bad weather, so all the civilian SAR helicopters was put on land. So we was a little bit lucky that all those helicopters who was on the oil platforms was on land. So we had a lot of helicopters capacity really fast.
3 hours later, only around 100 passengers have been rescued successfully. Many of those on board have no idea how close the ship has come to the deadly rocks.
When this happened, they were very lucky that it happened exactly on the spot it did, and that they got their anchor down and it stopped before they got further in, because there was reefs there as well. And actually I've seen a map later after the incident where you can see where exactly the ship is moving on the map. And at one point it is passing a reef which is 9 meters under the surface. And 9 meters is about how much the ship is under the water. So there were very small margins. This could have been a different history.
While the rescue mission is still underway, Jan Morten Dale holds talks with the crisis unit on how to obtain hundreds of body bags at short notice. Only days later does the reality of what could have happened hit him.
I was sitting in my living room it's like 5 o'clock in the morning, looking out towards the fjords. The snow was falling. I was alone. Then I started to cry because it was a huge operation and it could be a terrible outcome if the ship has turned around or sank. So after 2 days, I got a reaction.
Out at sea, the life of everyone on board depends on the ship's enormous steel anchors. By the next morning, only 479 passengers have been airlifted. After 16 hours, the captain manages to maneuver the ship out of danger. There are still close to 900 people on board. On that stormy day, the famous Hurtigruten postal boats never left port. It was deemed too risky. Was this a tragic yet isolated case? Or are huge cruise ships an accident waiting to happen? Can vessels of such magnitude ever be evacuated safely? After the Viking Sky incident, Norway's government carried out an inquiry. Arve Dimmen was on the parliamentary official committee.
Both the location of the Viking Sky incident and the weather conditions was such that the lifeboat was not a very good way to evacuate. So it was all by helicopters. And of course, evacuating with helicopter from a ship, it is given that it's a very slow process. And even though they were very efficient, they used approximately 2 minutes per passenger to get off the ship, which is very fast. But still, it took a lot of hours to get 400 or 500 people off the ship.
But some cruise ships have more than 5,000 passengers on board.
And that means that it will take time. It will take many days to get off all the passengers and crew of a big cruise ship. That is time you don't have.
Auch die Crew ist dann geschockt. Die ist das auch nicht gewohnt. Die üben das zwar viel.
Even if the crew have practiced evacuations, they're still likely to panic if something goes wrong. Suddenly, the ship feels like it's capsizing. The waves are pounding it, and the lights have gone out because the generators have stopped working. Once the emergency lighting comes on and everything looks dark, the crew stop functioning too. They're scared. They're not seafarers.
Da hält kein Schiff, kaum sind die Leute, selbst wenn man die in die Boote kriegt.
Even if you manage to get passengers into lifeboats, they might end up smashing into the ship's hull on the way down. These are horrific scenarios no captain ever wants to experience.
We just need to make sure that the regulators keep up, because it's a fact that the size of the really big cruise ships have gone dramatically up over the last years. And I personally, and we as a company, don't believe that these big ships should sail in all areas.
The island Giglio off the Tuscan coast in Italy. The Mediterranean Sea poses its own challenges for mega ships. In 2012, the Costa Concordia ran aground after sailing too close to the coastline. There were 4,229 people on board. The ship collides with this underwater reef.
There was this awful noise, not a bang, but the whole ship was shaking.
The reef had torn a 53-meter-long gash in the ship's port side.
Suddenly, our drinks were sliding across the table, and the ship felt lopsided. We didn't know what was happening.
Also da waren erstmal auf engstem Raum natürlich Tausende von Menschen.
There were thousands of people in a small space. It was chaos. People were pushing and shoving. Some were screaming. Some were crying. It was like a scene from the movie Titanic.
Although there were life jackets in the cabins, there was no time to retrieve them.
There were these huge crates on deck, 4 that were supposed to have life jackets inside, but they were all empty.
The ship's service personnel are forced to help with the lifeboats.
They were trying to help people but had no idea what to do. They didn't know how to let down the lifeboats or inflate life rafts. There were thousands of people in a small space. It was chaos. People were pushing and shoving. Some were screaming. Some were crying. It was like a scene from the movie Titanic.
A detailed inquiry later supported witness testimonies. 32 people lost their lives.
Once
the water began to pour in, we had to head in the opposite direction. My feet didn't touch the ground because the ship had tilted so much. I was pulling myself along by anything overhead. People around us were being pulled into lift shafts by the current. Everyone around us drowned. The water washed me into the restaurant, and I tried to swim toward the lights I could see through the windows, but they were just the lights on people's life jackets. They were sitting outside on the ship's hull, but there was no way of getting out because the windows were made of safety glass. It took me almost an hour to get out, and once the ship had completely capsized, I found myself lying on the hull. I just kept crawling along until I found a rescue ladder. It was horrendous. I thought I was going to die.
Do you still go on cruises?
Yes.
Why?
Because I love them. It's a holiday. It's time to relax. They have everything you need on board, and you get to experience a new destination every day.
The sinking of the Costa Concordia was another incident that prompted the industry's safe return to port concept. Cruise ships need to function as lifeboats and bring passengers back to shore safely.
The safe return to port function is not meant to sort of function on the type of fairways we have in Norway. It is sufficient if you are out in the sea and you have like a fire or something that puts some parts of your system out. Then you can eventually get back in operation and have the ship back to shore safely. But if things are happening when you are in a constrained fairway, then you simply don't have the time to do the procedure to sort of start the safe return to port function.
But how often do cruise liners actually get into serious trouble?
But it is something that happens from time to time. On all the ships we see in Norway, including cruise ship, it can be from like 100 times a year or maybe 200, depends on it varies a bit. On cruise ships, not very often, but it do happens.
Viking Sky's engine failure was not an isolated case. How can the risks along this coastline be reduced? More helicopters? More emergency response teams on land?
One of the main findings in our report is that you simply cannot have a rescue system or a emergency preparedness system that is capable of handling so many people if there's a major accident. So you need to work to lower the probability of accidents happening.
Unlike vessels that have sunk, incidents of passenger ships in distress at sea are not recorded. A cruise ship sinking is rare, but not unheard of. Almost 20 cruise ships have sunk in the last 50 years, usually after collisions or fire on board. Are new rescue systems required?
A vessel with loss of engine power, a helpless colossus left to the enormous forces of nature. The unthinkable is about to happen.
The problem is that with the current systems, the current rescue systems, there is no chance to survive for a long time at sea, especially not in the polar regions where it's freezing cold and you have these single-hulled boats or even a raft, which is only a floating tent.
Norwegian inventor Magne Reinstad had the idea of using huge torpedoes to catapult passengers off the vessel to safety.
The rescue torpedo is launched when everyone is safely strapped in their seat.
It's a new concept that allows people to enter the life craft inside the ship and go into a safe, much more protected life craft than the old-fashioned lifeboats, which will be launched with a quite high power to get away from the ship side, and where people can stay, they can live, remain there for days when it's necessary in warm, good conditions.
But new boats cost money. Sometimes it's easier to remain in port when a storm rolls in. However, rebooking passengers' return flights also creates more costs for ship owners. Costs that impact on profit. This multi-billion-dollar industry is extremely budget-conscious, but it also likes to highlight how everyone benefits from cruise travel, including the seaports where the cruise ships dock. Svein Larsen is researching this claim at the University of Bergen in Norway. He's interviewed around 20,000 cruise ship passengers. How much do they actually spend on shore? Do the cities that cruise liners visit really profit from the tourism?
Well, the people who stay in hotels spend the most money, of course, but cruise tourists are on the bottom of the whole hierarchy of spenders. Even backpackers spend more money, campers spend more money. So from a pure profit standpoint, of course, it's better for us to host backpackers and the campers than cruise tourists. Cruise tourism is arranged so that the cruise tourist will spend money on the cruise ship because it is the foreign owner of the cruise ship who earns the money and want to profit maximally from the cruise tourist.
But don't ship owners spend money on harbour dues and supplies? Professor of Economics Bouke Visser lives near Rotterdam's cruise terminal. He analysed how much cruise ships spend in the Netherlands and was surprised at the results.
So they claim indeed that every call, every visit that a cruise ship makes to a port would bring 1 million euros. And I thought that was a very high number. One ship, per ship, 1 million euros. This is a very open economy, so a lot of money comes in and a lot of money goes away. So I did some calculations using the statistics office, and I think in the end it's about 60,000 euros per call that remains in the city.
There are now officially recognised tables detailing the cost impact of climate emissions per cubic metre. Bouke Visser analysed these too.
If you use that report together with statistics on what the price is of the damage that is done, you come to a big sum. So per ship, on average, the cost of only nitrogen oxide emission, but just of one pollutant, amounts to something like 550,000 euros per call. So that is what you should compare with the 60,000 on the positive side.
It doesn't sound like good business for Rotterdam. Before the pandemic, cruise operators were making billions. So when it comes to tax contributions, is the situation any better? Carnival Cruise Line is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. The group owns the subsidiaries Costa, AIDA and Cunard. Documents filed by Carnival reveal that AIDA pays a paltry tax rate of 4.8% in Italy and is entirely exempt from German corporation tax. It's a similar scenario at other shipping companies. What's more, Germany's state-owned bank KfW helps finance the construction of new cruise liners with multi-million euro loans.
Shipping is excluded from many sorts of taxes. For example, VAT taxes, they don't have to pay. Income tax, they pay very little. Again, if you go to the financial statements, you see that in a typical year, like 2019, before the pandemic, they paid less than 1% of income tax, let's say profit, tax on profit, less than 1%, so it's very little.
This seemingly unfair practice is not only legal, but politically encouraged. In 1999, the EU introduced a very low tonnage tax rate from which cruise liners also profit. The aim was to prevent ship owners registering their ships under flags of convenience, such as Panama or Liberia. Until now, The huge environmental cost of cruising has never been properly reported. But there's change on the shipping horizon. In Norway, a number of ferries are already fully electric. There are even cruise ships with e-engines. But it's a small first step towards cleaning up the industry.
Yeah, and we can use them for different purposes. One is, of course, that we can sail only on batteries, but maybe more important is the peak shaving technology, which allows us to reduce the overall fuel consumption. And that has a huge effect. That is definitely not enough, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Otto Sverdrup is a hybrid-powered cruise ship and uses similar technology to cars. As well as oil tanks, the hull houses battery tanks. Electric technology supports the main engines, resulting in energy savings of around 10%.
Before on this ship, when you were maneuvering, you need an additional auxiliary engine to start up, to power up the side thrusters. But now the batteries are providing that power.
The ship also has a type of catalyst to reduce the amount of nitrogen oxide emissions. Smaller ships produce lower emissions and have fewer safety issues. Could they be the future?
I think we should look at, is it right to operate a ship with 8,500 people to the very, very remote and sensitive area like Svalbard or Spitsbergen? The same applies to the northern part of the Norwegian coast, and the same should apply to other regions in the world. Regulators need to look at whether it's feasible from an evacuation and safety perspective to take this monster ship into the regions.
Shipping companies are locked in a PR race to launch the world's first zero-emission cruise ship. There's rough sailing ahead with all hands on deck needed to navigate issues like environmental conservation and passenger safety. And cruise lovers around the world will be watching.